Hello everyone. I'd like to share with all of you that recently I have completed ISELA TOT. ISELA TOT means International Social Emotional Learning Assessment Training of Trainer, and received this training from Dr. Allyson Krupar, Senior Advisor, Researcher, Evaluation and Learning, Save the Children, Washington DC, USA. Now I am sharing part 2 of this training with you all, guys. Here it is.
So if you need to drop off, I know it's quite late and you may need to eat something or step away for a minute, and that's fine. You can also go back to the recording. And you should be able to access that in Teams. If you're having trouble accessing it because you're outside Save the Children, please do let me know. We can upload it to YouTube so you're able to access it. All right. One more, waiting a little bit longer here. People are still joining. Many people.
Hello.
Hello. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Uh, have you received my email?
I think. Yes. No, I have gone through and I'm actually just finishing it up now, going through the feedback from the homework. There were a lot of responses that we haven't contextualized everything, so we will spend a little bit of time at the beginning here talking about those. People are still joining. It looks like we're having a little bit of connection issues, so I'm trying to give a couple minutes so people can join.
Okay.
Ellie, we sent probably four presentation on homework. Did you receive
Yes.
all?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I have received. Again, I'm going through them. I haven't added all of the appropriate and inappropriate responses that you all have provided. We will need to talk a little bit about this. So,
Yeah.
Okay.
Was that supposed to be sent like on PPT format? I send it in what format?
It's fine. Either way is fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, again, people did it a little bit differently, so it's fine however you did it. Okay. I have added some slides, so let me get a link so I can share the revised PowerPoint with you all.
Yes.
And it looks like we have everyone now, so we can get started. All right, so I'll be getting this link and putting it in the chat. But today what we're going to do is focus on the homework. We'll do that first and review the appropriate and inappropriate responses for the questions that we need to consider those. And we will go through the COBO form. So you'll see the skip logic in action. And that will help feel, confident and feel like you will be able to help the enumerators also access and use the COBO form. Is there anyone who's planning to do data collection on paper, or is everyone planning to do data collection in COBO?
Especially, we are collecting data and different survey from COBO. No
Okay.
paper questionnaire
Oh.
used.
Yeah, the paper form is not as rigorous. So I'm glad that you all are using Kobo. It's definitely a lot more straightforward.
I think we usually take the responses in paper format and then we post it to Kobo, I think, if I'm not wrong. I'm not sure.
Okay.
It is not a common practice actually. Somebody collect from paper and then input Kobo. Somebody direct collect from field using Kobo. It's different.
Yeah, ideally we would be collecting directly using Kobo, because the
Exactly.
paper form, yeah,
Exactly.
the paper form is just there's more risks that the enumerators will make a mistake, basically.
Yes.
I think Kobo will be easier for us as there is a skip option in Kobo.
Yeah, exactly. So the enumerators do not have to pay too much attention to the skip because it's already built in.
Yeah.
And that makes life easier.
It will be more perfect.
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to upload this and it keeps saying upload failed. So unfortunately it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to share the revised. Yeah, it's still saying upload failed. Yeah. I will share this as soon as I'm able to. You can see what's happening here. But again, the agenda here is we're going to look at the appropriateness of each item and then look at the Kobo. And then we'll start talking about planning for the enumerator training. We'll again take a break at 1.5 hours. And I think Yusuf, you were my timekeeper last time. So if I'm running
no
over,
problem.
yeah,
I am ready.
please interrupt me.
Okay.
All right. Let's go full screen. So I'm going to skip down here to the stress management section. So some of you tried to contextualize different sections, but the appropriate and inappropriate responses here are really only in the stress management, the empathy, and the conflict resolution sections. The self-concept section, it's just important that the enumerators know what would be examples of potential futures. So we'll talk more about that when we get to it. All right. So in stress management, let's look at the sample instructions. So in the examples, in the examples, we have things about breathing, exercising, and it's pretty similar to what you all shared. So I think that we're on the right track with this one. It's pretty straightforward. Examples, if we go back to the questions, we're asking children to give us examples of what they do to calm down when they're angry or upset. And they need to think of 3 examples. And if they are unable to think of one, then we skip. If they're unable to think of 2, then we skip. We only ask for 3 if they can identify one reason and then another reason. So again, the examples here I think are really good. There's some things that weren't added. Yeah, is there a question or is someone just unmuted?
Question, just before slide, earlier slide.
This one?
Yes. If first question is incorrect or no response, then go to another question or D2, D3 if we miss. I don't know.
Great question. So again, in the skip pattern, if D1 is incorrect, they skip D2 and D3. If D1 is correct, you move on to D2. If D2 is correct, you move on to D3. If D2 is incorrect, you move to the next section. Yeah. And again, this is built in Kobo, so we'll see how it looks when we get to the Kobo form.
Okay.
Yeah, great question. Again, so I think these are great examples. So I added them here. Then you can use these with the data collectors. Taking deep breaths, exercising, thinking positively, talking to someone. Spend time alone as well as spend time with other people. Both of those came up in your responses, but I think that those are both, ways to calm down when you're upset. Wait until you're calm to do something, sing a song. I like the recite a poem as an example. Read a book. That's one that wasn't included. Eat your favorite food. And then the inappropriate would be like avoiding the problem, getting in a fight, making inappropriate gestures, which I think is referring to like hand gestures. I'm sure that you all have your own hand gestures that are inappropriate that you know. In the US, we also have them. Break something, throw things, ignore that you're upset, so pretend that you're not upset. Punch the walls or punch, stationary objects, hurt yourself, and then don't know. So these are great examples of appropriate and inappropriate ways for children to calm down when they're upset. Does anyone have anything they want to add here or any comments on this list that you all have generated? Great. Yeah, Nazma, go
Actually,
ahead.
actually, when we did in the morning, we tried to input all the things here appropriate and inappropriate responses, and we explore everything, and we tried to put here everything. So from my point of view, I don't have anything to add, and I don't find anything to add here. More extra thing can be put it here.
Yeah, if things come up in the data collector training, you can definitely add them. I think that, again, children are unpredictable, so they may say things we can't expect. But I
Yes.
think just the data collectors just need to know some examples so that they can, correctly code the responses. Great.
Yes.
Great. All right. So stress management we've got taken care of. So let's move to empathy. So empathy also requires contextualization because we want to identify a feeling and we want to identify ways that the child could help another child feel better. So this is the first section. And again, I added things in here from what you all have shared, like sad or upset as appropriate responses. Inappropriate would be like happy, pleased, doesn't feel anything. I don't care how this child feels. That's a good one that I hadn't thought of before. Or of course, I don't know. So I don't know is going to be an inappropriate response on all of these questions. So
Right.
the sorry, go ahead.
No, right. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, the E2 and E3, those are the what would you do to help her or him feel better, and is there anything else you would do? So hug them, again, that might differ by gender, and it's okay if it, is differs by gender. Provide something to them like chocolate or sharing a toy. Talk to them, ask them about what's going on, listen to them. I like that one a lot as well. Comfort them, play with them, compliment them. I thought that was a good one too. And then on the inappropriate would be avoid them, tease them, run away, do nothing, ignore that she's upset, or don't pay attention. So this list, again, this is collected from all of the things that you've submitted. So I may not have caught everything. Are there any appropriate and inappropriate responses that you would like to add here? Great. And again, you can do this same activity with the enumerators during the data collection training, where you actually come up with appropriate and inappropriate responses, or you can provide them this list and then brainstorm whether or not there's other things that children might say. Yeah, Yusuf, I see you unmuted.
Yes, I learned from this slide that appropriate response is case to case different, right? We know appropriate response, happy, pleased, don't feel anything, does not feel anything, I don't care. But here, sorry, inappropriate response is like avoid them, this run away, do nothing. On the other hand, appropriate response, hug. But E1, we see sad and upset is the appropriate response. So it's based on the story, right? But based on the case.
Yeah, so in this, these questions, we're asking them just what they would help to do to help a child who's crying feel better. So we haven't told the story yet, but it is going to be different for each child. Some children might, you know, again, like a girl seeing another girl crying might give her a hug.
Yeah.
You know, but a boy seeing a girl crying might, you know, just talk to her to see what's wrong. And so it will be case by case. And that's why we need to know some examples of what would be appropriate, regardless of gender, regardless of age, you know, thinking about what would be appropriate ways to help someone feel better.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
great. All right, so I think this list is pretty good. We do run into some problems as we move forward. So the next section, this is the story. And what we're looking here is a non-hostile response to why the other child bumped into this girl while making the line. And then identifying how the other child felt after the girl or boy started crying. And so we didn't get that many on this one. Let me minimize so that we can actually make edits here. And I'll try to make this as big as possible so you can see it. All right. Admit. Okay. So in this example, we have here the non-hostile responses would be that the child didn't see her in line. The line was too crowded. That was a good one, especially since the story says that everyone's trying to line up at once. The child was bumped by someone else. It was an accident. The other child wanted to be first in line. That was the hostile response I saw, or I don't know. And in the example responses, we have the other child was a bully or the other child didn't like her. With the bully, is that one appropriate in context? Are there children who bully other children, and is that something that is commonly talked about by children?
This is not appropriate.
think
It is
I don't think in this concept this goes with this concept.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so the
This-
only thing I added here is the other child was mean. So again, that they meant to. What we're going for is the hostile response is that the other child meant to push the girl, boy. That's the hostile response. So E5, going back to that one, is how do you think the other child felt after the girl started crying? So we didn't get actually any responses that I saw, but again, I was going through these first thing this morning, so I may have missed your responses. But the examples here are like bad, guilty, sorry. I think scared is another good example, especially if they feel like they're going to get in trouble or they feel like the other child might tell on them. Guilty, sorry. Are there other feelings that children might have when they see another child crying after they've pushed them? Maybe upset. Honestly, you know, for young children, they might start crying themselves because they feel bad. But we would want the feeling word. Yeah, Yusuf?
I just add sad, upset, sad, sorry.
Yeah, sad is good.
Like that.
Okay. And then the inappropriate responses. So we got, they didn't care. They felt nothing. I don't know. Some of the other examples, again, would be just like feeling happy or pleased. They were glad that the girl fell, you know, something like that. Are there other inappropriate responses here to how the other child felt after the child they pushed started crying? Anything we're missing here? Great. All right, moving right along. So empathy again has the other section where we're looking at an angry child. And again, you can pick from these pictures. Just make sure that you're using the same picture. And we have the same questions about how we think the other child is feeling. And again, I didn't see that many responses here, but appropriate responses would be things like angry, upsets, where is it? Mad, frustrated. Are there any other appropriate responses that might come up to how this picture, this child in the picture of the angry child would be feeling? Okay. And then what would you do to help him calm down? And is there anything else you would do? So the appropriate responses of what you would do to help him calm down would be things like, scroll down, sorry, my dog. They're very similar to the first section. So things like give him a hug, talk to him, tell an adult or talk to an adult. What other appropriate responses would be here? Any other appropriate
Like give him
responses?
chocolates, play with him, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. That's great.
Uh, play-
Nazma, did you have one?
offering help, that how can I help you, or can I help you to solve this problem, or something like this.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
All right, so inappropriate responses. So going back to the picture of the angry child, again, inappropriate responses would be pretty similar to the first section where the child would identify the wrong feeling, basically like happy or pleased. They would say they don't care how the other child is feeling or that they don't know. There may be other feelings that come up that the child will say, and you just want to think about, how well they map to these different sides. And then the inappropriate actions that you could do to support the other child. So ignore him, run away, pretend like there's nothing wrong. That one came up.
Avoid him.
Avoid him. Yeah. Any others? I'm scrolling down to what we have as examples. Oh, make fun of him. Don't care. Don't
Pay
know.
no attention.
Yeah.
Don't know is a common inappropriate response.
Yeah. Any others? Great, we're making some good lists here. All right, so now this is the last section in empathy. We tell the story about why this boy is angry. So we're looking again for a non-hostile response about why the other child spilled water all over the drawing and how we think that the other child felt after they spilled the water and the boy got angry. So again, we had the non-hostile response of the child was bumped by someone or it was crazy or when it was crowded. They didn't mean to. It was an accident. And then a hostile response would be, they didn't like the boy. They were jealous. They wanted to basically mess up the drawing. Yeah, or they didn't care. Anything else?
Willingly damage the drawing.
Yeah, they did it on purpose. Yeah, great. All right, so then the next question is how we think that the other child felt once the boy got angry. So again, this might be scared, upset, sad, bad, guilty. You know, those would all be appropriate feelings that the child might feel. And then inappropriate responses could be things like didn't feel anything, didn't care, felt happy, pleased, don't know. Any other examples of, you know, how they might feel when they see that the boy gets angry? Sorry, I added that one. Does this look good? Yeah, Nazma, go ahead.
I think this is enough.
Okay, great. All right, so then the next section is we're going to skip growth mindset and go straight to conflict resolution. So conflict resolution again has this scenario where we have a toy the other child is playing with. There's only one toy. So what would you do in this situation? And is there anything else you would do? So for the first section, we had a lot of responses from you all, which was great. You know, they were sharing, taking turns, talking to the other child. I like this one, creating an agreement about like when you'll play with it and they'll play with it, and finding something else to play with. And then for the inappropriate responses, you all said that they would avoid the other child, destroy the toy, run away, fight with or attack the other child, blame the other child for wanting the toy, hide the toy from the other child, or don't know. So I think that we might add talk to an adult or someone else about it as an appropriate response so that they talk to someone. Are there any other appropriate and inappropriate responses here that we could add? Again, this question is when there's only one toy and both children want to play with it. Now, the next section is a little bit more complicated. So there's only one toy and both children want to play with it, but the other child takes the toy. So what do you do? And is there anything else you would do? So we have some good responses here from you all for your homework, which was talk to the other child, ask them to share, create an agreement, again, to share the toy, ask the child to wait their turn, find something else to play with. And again, I'll add talk to an adult or someone else. And then inappropriate would be avoid the other child, run away, fight with, attack the other child, ignore them. That would actually go in both sections here as an inappropriate response, or I don't know. Are there any other things that would be appropriate or inappropriate for the child to resolve the conflict where basically their toy has been stolen? Does this look good? I will take silence as yes, you like this list. Yeah, go ahead, Disha.
Yes.
It looks good.
Great. So the other section I asked you to think about was the self-concept section. So here we don't have really appropriate and inappropriate. We just want to make sure that we are talking, the enumerators understand what would be examples of a potential hope in the future, and one thing that could stop and support that hope in the future. So I did find you all provided one appropriate and inappropriate example here, where this girl wants to become a pilot. And so that would be an appropriate hope that for something that would happen in their future. Something that would stop them from doing this would be not setting goals and not believing in herself. That's a great example of something that could stop her from doing this. And something that would support her from doing this is her parents and her environment being positive and supporting her. So those are great examples that the child might say in terms of being appropriate responses to these. Yeah, Saida, did you have something?
Actually, yeah. Actually, I lost. There's a load shedding in my house. I might lose my connections. So let's check that's it. I'm using my mobile data right now. Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry you have to use your mobile
Can you
data.
hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. It's a little choppy,
Yeah.
but I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So if you do lose connection, again, this is being recorded, and I can share that link with you if you do not have access to it, so you can go back if you missed something. Okay. So example of inappropriate responses that you all provided would be if you can you describe what you hope will happen in your life in the future? And the child says that they don't have anything, they don't know. So that would be an inappropriate response, and then you would stop and you would just end the assessment because this is the last section. If they ignore the question and stay quiet, again, that would be an inappropriate response. So other examples of inappropriate responses here would be things that are unrealistic, like becoming a dog, things that are impossible. Becoming a tree, becoming something that doesn't exist, like a unicorn. And so those would be inappropriate responses because they're impossible for the child to do. And again, even if we think, like if the child wants to become a pilot, and we think that's very unlikely that this child will become a pilot, we're not going to mark that as inappropriate because even if it's not likely, it's still something that could happen. So also becoming a politician, or becoming famous, those would all be examples of appropriate responses. Does anyone have any questions on how we score the self-concept section? Great. All right. So I added here some slides, and I can present this about administration and administering ISELA. And so this section is really making sure that all of the enumerators are doing the same things with children. But before we get through this, I think it will be good to go through the assessment on Kobo and look at the skip logic. So let me go to Kobo here, and I will share the link in the chat. Please do follow along. Is everyone able to follow that link?
Yes, I see.
Yes, we can see.
Great. So yes, please follow along on your own device if you can. Those of you on the phone, you might have trouble with this, but if you can follow along on your device, please do. So we're going to enter in information here. So we'll put today's dates. I'm the assessor. I am conducting the assessment. Again, I am, in this case, not working in a pair. So the only time that an enumerator will collect listening is when they are working in a pair and they are not the one speaking. Now, again, we're going to talk a little bit more about that when we're doing the planning for the enumerator training. All right. And then the school or center name, currently we do not have any school or center names that we can select. So that is a bit of a problem because it's going to get in our way. But when we add in the names of the schools or centers in your sample, we will be able to select. And then the same with the school or center code. And then we have regions here. This can be locations, this can be community names, whatever you want to see in terms of like, if you want to be able to compare the results by location. So you can add that in. And then the teacher's or facilitator's full name. I'm just going to put my name again. And then the child's grade. This needs to be updated as well because the children in the sample are older than these grades. So we'll need to make sure that we have the appropriate grades. I think you said 5 to 8 in the meeting yesterday. So I can add those in. But if there are other grades that would be potentially in the sample, please let me know. Okay, and then the child's full name. I'm just going to enter my name again. And then the child ID, I'm just going to enter the number 1. And I am female, so I'm going to put female. And I am, I'm technically a national migrant because I moved. I moved to Washington, D.C. For work when I was, back in 2007. So I'm going to call myself a national migrant. Okay, and then we click next. Now we have an error in the form. I want to make sure that we're selecting the school name and the center name or the center code. So for some reason that didn't let us do it the first time, but I will go into Kobo and try to fix that for you. Okay, and this is another reason we go through this tool together as well as with the enumerators to make sure that everything is working as well as to make sure that everyone understands it. All right, so now we have the assent statement. Again, this is the most important question in the assessment because if we don't get this right, then we are not, fairly assessing the child. Yusuf, did you have something you wanted to ask?
Yeah, before going to next, I have a question about region. Region, is it applicable for our country, Bangladesh?
It's up to you. So this is, you can take this question out if it's not appropriate. Nazma?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, excellent.
Isubai, I think it will be region. As region, we can mention either North City Corporation and or South City Corporation, like that.
Like,
No.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Because
This will be just a city corporation or ward.
word number.
City.
Region 1 means what city corporation? It is south or north?
I think LA is writing here only sample basis. It is not actual.
Yeah.
Bhai. We can change this name region or we can
Right.
change to city corporation or ward.
Thank you, bhai. Clear.
Yes,
Okay.
we can add or modify it according to our
Exactly, context.
context. Yes.
Thank you so
Great.
much.
So I can make the change to add the North City Corporation and the South City Corporation and change this name to City Corporation rather than location community region. But if there are other locations, I don't know if there's an East City Corporation where children may be from. Please let me know and we can tweak this. But yes, it has to be contextually relevant. The same with school or center. So if you're working in like a community center and you're not working in any schools, then we would change that name and we would add the names of the schools or the community centers. Okay.
Right.
Any other questions
But
on this page?
yeah, I
go
have
ahead.
a question regarding to conducting assessment. Another option is listening only. But I don't know listening only what his or her activity. Only listening. Why
Yes.
Why this
Yes.
total assessment tool will be used?
Great question. So this question is for what we call inter-rater reliability. So between the data collectors, we want to make sure that they are consistently assessing children in the same way. So they would be responding, like when we're coding an appropriate and inappropriate response, we want to make sure that the enumerators are both identifying the appropriate and inappropriate in the same way. So what we do in order to check that is the first child of every day, the enumerators actually collect in pairs. So it will be two enumerators sitting with one child. One of the enumerators is speaking and going through all of the questions, and the other enumerator is only listening and marking the responses as well as the enumerator who is speaking. So they both mark the responses. And then in the analysis, we look at, was there agreement or was there disagreement? And if there's a lot of disagreement, it tells us that the enumerators are not collecting the data in the same way, which makes us a little suspicious of whether or not we're actually measuring what the child says. We want there to be very little disagreement between the enumerators. It also gives the enumerators time to see how others ask the questions and build rapport. And so they can also learn a lot from each other during that pair work. But yes, this is a very important point. And especially since we've never used this tool before in its form, as the adolescence tool, we want to make sure that the data collectors are collecting the data in the same way, from the children. And the only way to know that is to have them work in pairs with one child. So again, it's the first child of every day that they assess will be assessed in pairs. And we will talk more about this, but I'm glad you brought it up because it does come up a lot in the enumerator training, as well as we're doing the data collection, we need to plan to make sure that the enumerators are working in pairs for that first child of the day. They don't assess all children in pairs, only the first child. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
Great.
That means this is always not on-to-one or face-to-face on enumerator and on child. That is not always correct. Sometime two enumerator on child. Is this correct?
Yes, exactly. But it's not every child that is assessed by two enumerators. It's only 10% of the sample. So that's why we say the first child of every day, because that's usually 10% at the end of the sample will be assessed in pairs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
10%
Okay.
for every enumerator. Each enumerator, is it?
Yeah, so we do want each enumerator to have the chance to work in pairs. So let's say on, Nazma and Islam, you are assessing children in the same community center one day. The first
Yes.
child that you assess, you're going to assess together. One of you will be speaking, one of you will be listening, and then the rest of the children you assess individually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Understood.
Great. Great. All right. So any other questions on this before we move forward?
So the first child has to be, for the first child, there has to be two enumerators, right?
Yes, the first child of every day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, for every
Yeah.
day. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically in the morning when they arrive at the center, the two enumerators will sit together with one child and then they'll go through the full assessment. One will be speaking, the other will be listening, and they both will score that child. And then they'll break up and each enumerator will just work individually with children. Okay. Next is the assent. Again, most important question. So if the child says no, you submit. If the child says not right now, you can save as draft. And to do that save draft, you would put maybe the child's name or ID number, so ID 1, and then you can save and close. If you save, then it's blank, so you would start over. But if you save, you can go here on this side to open the assessment again. So this is important for data collectors to know because they might have a child who pauses the assessment and wants to come back, but is unable to, comes back 2 hours later, and the assessor has already worked with another child. So that's why saving is useful. But if the child says yes, you click next. Any questions on saving before we move on? Great. And just make sure the enumerators understand that. If they've worked with Kobo before, they would probably be comfortable with it. If they haven't, you may need to go over it so that they feel comfortable. All right. So how old are you in years? So again, here we're looking at the age range of the children in this sample. So this is 8 to 14. So let's say the child is 8. And that's what they tell us. If the child says, I don't know, you put 999. Okay. And then what is your date of birth? And then you're entering in first the year. So if they're 14, let's do the math on that. That means that they were born in 2008. And what is your date of birth? Month. So you ask this question, what is your date of birth? And they may give you the full date of birth. They may not, in which case you can say, well, what is the year that you were born? And let's say they were born in January, and then they were born on the 1st of January. And a lot of children are born on the 1st of January because they don't know. It's actually really common. But yeah, we would just basically mark in what the child says. And if the child doesn't provide the full date, then you put 999 or you skip. So then we have the languages that they speak at home. Maybe they speak 2. You have that as an option. Maybe they speak another language. And you have that as an option as well. And the please specify should come up. And I don't see it, so I'm going to fix that. All right, and then this is that socioeconomic status question. Does your house have, and then you go through each of the options. So does your house have electricity? If they say yes, you mark it. If they say no, you do not mark it. Does your house have a tin or concrete roof? Does your house have indoor bathroom or toilet? Does your house have television, etc., etc.? If they do not respond to any of these, you put don't know, no response. And again, this list, it should be the 3 most common items that almost all households would have, the 4 average items that, maybe about half of households would have, maybe a little more, and then the 3 least common items that only the wealthiest households would have. So make sure that this list reflects your context. It should, because it was already contextualized, but I want to make sure. Excuse me. All right, so the next question is, have you ever had to work to earn money to support your family? These are the risk questions, and we went over these yesterday. So the child will say yes, no, or they won't respond. Have you ever had to miss school for longer than a month? Yes, no, no response. Have you ever had to leave home because it was not safe? Have you ever lived in a home where people yelled or shouted at each other? Have you ever lived in a home where people pushed, slapped, or threw something at each other? I can make this a little bit bigger. Have you ever gone hungry because there was not enough food? And has anyone in your family ever been away for more than 6 months? All right, so any questions on this background questions section?
I just asked one simple question. When I asked to the children, what is your date of birth in year? If he not able to give the answer or did not able to remember his date of birth year, then 999. In that case, we can we see our database where we already listed date of birth? No.
If you have that, if the enumerators have this information, then yes, you can, they can just draw on the information that they have. If the child says like they don't know, they can say, okay, well, in the database that we have, it says that you were born on January 1st. I'm going to enter that in. They don't
Yeah.
actually have to say that to the child. But yeah, they can just add in the information if they have it.
Thank you. So then we use 999.
Yeah, yeah. If they don't have it, then you would use 999.
Baseline ID and ISELA survey ID will be the same, right?
Sorry?
Baseline ID and ISELA survey ID will be the same. Am I right?
Oh, the child ID. Yeah, so great question. So your child ID, if you are collecting other data, the child ID should match the other data that you're collecting. Ideally, the child ID is not like the national ID. We don't want to be collecting that sort of information because it's very identifiable. So in the US, we have what's called a social security number, and you would not ask for that. That is a very protected information. But if you have an ID number that you have already used, then yes, please use that ID number and provide it to the data collectors. If you do not, then the data collectors can generate their own ID numbers that day, and we can then create unique ID numbers after the assessment, after the baseline. Yeah, that's a great question. And you enter that on the identification page, not on this section. All right. Any other questions on this page before we move forward?
Okay.
Great. All right, so now we're in the relationship section. So who do you live with? And you see here that the skip logic is built in. So if the child says that they live with no one, then you do not ask any of the questions about, their use of social supports. Or if their child says, I don't know, you enter 999 and you do not ask any more. You skip to the next question. If the child says they live with 5 people, then you have the next question of, do you talk to anyone at home when you are sad? If they say no, then you go to, do you talk to anyone at home for help when you have a problem with a friend? If they say yes, you ask, do you talk to anyone else at home when you are sad? And then the same here. If they ask for anyone at home for help when they have a problem with a friend, if they say no or they don't answer this question, then you skip. If they say yes, you ask, do you ask anyone else at home if they have a problem with a friend? And then the same here. If you're working on something difficult, do you ask anyone for help? So you can see how the skip logic is built in here. And if you're following along on your own machine, you should be able to click through here as well. And then the last question, all of the children are asked if they are if they tell us that they're living with their family, do you know when someone at home is feeling sad? Again, the same here. If the child says, they don't have any friends, you answer 0. If the child refuses to answer, you enter 999. And if the child says that they have one good friend, all right? Then do you talk to your friends when they're sad? No, yes. Do you have, when you have a problem with another child, do you go to your friends for help? No, yes. And so there's no skip here because we're not asking for 2. And then the same here. Now I want you to think about adults who you meet regularly in your school, center, and community. Can you tell me which adults you meet regularly? 0. They don't answer. Or they talk with 3 adults. Do you talk with them when you're sad? Do you talk with them when you have a problem with your friend? If you're working on something difficult, do you ask them for help? And then do you know when they're sad? Okay, so there's no skip logic in the community adults or in the friends, but there is in the household. Any questions on this section? Great.
It's clear.
Yeah. All right, so then we move to stress management. So in the stress management, we want them to tell us how they can calm down. We just talked about the appropriate, inappropriate responses. So if they are inappropriate response, we mark as incorrect, do not know, and we just click next. You see that nothing comes up. If they do not respond to this question, then we mark no response and click next. If they are able to identify an appropriate way that they calm down, maybe they say, I take deep breaths. We ask them if there's another thing that they do when they're angry or upset. And then maybe they say, I talk to my mother. That would be a correct response. And then we ask, is there anything else you would do to help yourself calm down? And then they're like, I don't know. Well, then that would be incorrect. Do not know. Okay. Any questions on stress management in the skip logic? Again, once it's in Kobo, it's so much easier for the skip logic because it's already built in. All right, empathy section. So you see here, sorry, was there a question, Disha, or I saw someone unmute? All right, I want to keep going. In the empathy section, you'll see the materials here. So this is not read to the child. This is for the data collector to know. They should have the materials in front of the child. Now let's look at this picture. How do you think this child is feeling right now? So they show the picture to the child and they ask them this question. And you can see here there's a note that if the child identifies that the girl is feeling sad, hurt, or upset, that would be an appropriate response. Incorrect response would be something like child is crying, or another descriptive that is not about how the child feels. Or incorrect, do not know. If the child is correct, then you ask the next question. If the child is incorrect, you just click next. And then you show them the angry child. So you don't ask any of the other questions if the child is unable to identify the feeling of the crying girl. So then if they are, you mark correct. And then you ask them what they would do to help her feel better. We just talked about the appropriate, inappropriate responses. So if they are not able to think of anything, incorrect, do not know. And again, you skip to the story. This time you skip to the story because they might be able to identify this other information, even if they cannot identify something to help the child feel better. If they are able to, then you ask them what you would do to help them feel better. And then if they are able to do that, you mark correct and move on. So then we get to the story. Again, the skip logic here. If they're incorrect, you just skip. If they are correct, then you ask, how do you think the other child felt after the girl started crying? All right, any questions on the skip logic on this first part of the empathy section? Great. This section is the same. This is the angry child. You show the picture of the angry child. If they are incorrect, you click next and you just go to growth mindset. If they are correct, you continue to ask the questions. Again, if they're not able to identify something to help them calm down, you don't ask the next question about being able to identify something else. You just go to the story. But if they are able to, then you ask them if they can identify something else to help the child calm down. And if they're unable to do that, you still go to the story. In either case, you go to the story. Why do you think the other child spilled the water all over the drawing? Again, we just talked about the correct and incorrect responses, but the skip logic is here, where if they're correct, you ask them how they felt, and if they're incorrect or no response, you just end the empathy section. All right, any questions on the skip logic or the empathy section? Great. And I know this is a review of what we talked about yesterday, but I want to be clear on the skip logic specifically. So in the growth mindset section, there is no skip logic. So this is pretty easy. These are yes, no, or no response, I don't know questions. And so the enumerator would just mark these based off of what the child says. This one is very easy. Any questions on this before we move on? Great. We click next and we're in the conflict resolution or the solving conflict section. So this one does have a skip logic. So they're imagining the situation where they're playing with the toy. Another child wants to play with that same toy, but there's only one toy. If they do not know how to resolve the situation appropriately, then you skip the rest of the conflict resolution section. So you don't ask any of the other questions. If they are able to, then you mark it as correct. If they are not able to identify anything else that they would do, then you skip the rest of the conflict resolution. So basically, every time you ask a question in this, you end, if they're unable to do it, you end the conflict resolution section. But if they are able to do it, you keep moving forward. And so now we have the situation where things get a little bit more heated and the other child takes the toy. So this would be incorrect, and we would end and move to the next section, or correct, and we would ask if there's anything else that they would do. All right, any questions on conflict resolution and the skip logic before I move on?
Uh, uh, I would like to ask a question on my team, whether they are comfort with this data, or they understand properly or not.
Yes, Appa, I can understand. No problem.
Okay. And what about others, whether they are, because when we'll go to the field test, we need to be very clear concept. Okay.
Okay, Appa, I understand this.
Okay, thank you.
It's clear.
Farzana, did you get this? Farzana, are you there?
Yes.
Okay. Please ask anything if you don't get anything, okay?
Okay.
Yes, and I also understand that I have an American accent, so if there are things that are just unclear in how I say them, feel free to ask. I know my accent can be thick sometimes. All right. So then we click next and we go to social skills and communication. Now, this one, we also do not have a skip logic. So this is just based off of what the child tells us. Very straightforward. And we just answer each of these questions. Now, one thing I will point out now, because this is an easy section, is you see these little stars. The little red stars mean that the question is required. So if the enumerator, let's say, doesn't mark one of the questions, they'll see this. This field is required. So if they click next and they try to move forward and they haven't marked a question, then they have to go back and mark it. And that's also useful in case they accidentally miss something, which can easily happen, especially if they're using their phone for data collection, because it's such a small screen. The other thing I would highlight on that, since this is an easy section, is that if they are using their phone, to make sure that they zoom in so that they're able to read the questions easily. I think a lot of us wear glasses or have trouble seeing small print. So in those cases, just make sure the data collectors know how to make the print bigger so that they can read it. All right, and then we click next. And we're in the higher order thinking skills. Now, this one, I did add a skip logic after our conversation yesterday. So based off of our conversation yesterday, we need to know if the child is able to identify these last few problems, right? So if they do not know, if they took action to solve the problems, then we're not going to ask them any other questions about solving the problems. But if they say even that they disagreed, then we ask them the next, because maybe they didn't take action or they don't feel like they took action, but they did ask someone else for help. So then they agreed and then they move on. But if they don't know, no response, then we skip. If they agree, we ask them if they tried to think of different ways to solve the problem. And then if they agree, we ask if they tried to make a plan to solve the problem. So this will also make the section shorter for children who maybe don't have those problem solving skills. And then the next is about the last few times that they made a decision. And again, if they're unable to tell us if they collected information, then we don't keep asking them questions about the decision. Even if they disagree, we ask them the next question. Even if they disagree, we ask them the next question. And then we move on to thinking about the last few times someone told you an interesting story. So if they don't know, we end the growth mindset section. If they agree or if they disagree, then we move on, and then we move on. All right, any other questions on this section?
Fine.
Okay, great. Yeah, and this is pretty straightforward, except that that skip logic is in there so that we shorten it and we're not putting pressure on children who maybe can't think of any decisions that they made, or can't think of any problems that they solved. So this way they don't feel embarrassed. It's a shorter section. All right, self-concept. So this is the last section. We're moving right along through this. So again, we have this question that the child attempts the drawing. And so this isn't part of the assessment. It's just to know whether or not the child attempted the drawing. So if it's incorrect, it doesn't affect the skip logic other than if they included their self in the drawing. So if it's incorrect, or they do not know. I mean, honestly, children, maybe children don't feel comfortable drawing in front of someone. Maybe they, don't want to at that moment. But this is really, the drawing is just to help them think through what they want to be or what they hope for in their future. So it's just an activity. It's not part of their self-concept score. And then we move into, can they tell me one thing that they would like to be doing in the future? Now you see here, the skip logic is already here. So if the child is not able to identify something that they want to be doing in their future, or that they hope for in their future, then you just mark incorrect, do not know, and you thank them, and you end the assessment. You submit. If they are, you have the question about things that might stop them from doing this. If they're unable to identify something that would stop them from doing this activity, you mark incorrect, do not know, you thank them, and you end the assessment. If they are, then you ask them something to support them in doing this activity. Again, the skip logic is here. If it's incorrect, you end the assessment. You don't continue asking questions. If it's correct, you ask them to think about another thing that they would like to be doing in their future, that they hope for. Incorrect, and the assessment, or no response also, and the assessment. But if they can think of something else, maybe they've thought about this a lot, they have a lot of future plans, then you mark correct. Again, same skip logic. Incorrect, you end the assessment. Correct, you ask again if they can identify a stop, something that would stop them from doing this. You ask them if there's something that would support them. And then that's the last question that could be asked, assuming that they've been correct on the others. Any questions on the self-concept section?
All clear.
Great. So again, here we have save draft. So if the child has done no responses throughout, but is planning to come back, we would save the draft. And this already has ID 1 in it so that we know what it is. But if the enumerator saves it as a draft, one of the important things is that means it will not upload. So they have to go in here, open that draft, go to end. Sorry for moving quickly, and then hit submit. So if they're done, they've gone through the whole section, they finished the entire assessment, all they have to do is hit submit. And it will upload automatically when they have Wi-Fi or internet access. So one thing to keep in mind is if the data collectors are using their own devices, this may use their data. And so you would want to make sure that you've either, let them know that they'll be using their data to upload, or have them give them, you know, some money for data or some data cards, whatever it is that you would use there. For those who are using Wi-Fi, they might not be able to upload until they have Wi-Fi access. So just keep in mind that all of the data will need to be uploaded as soon as the data collectors can access Wi-Fi. One of the things we've done in the past is have all the data collectors come to the office at the end of the day, and then they upload from there. And that also gives you a chance to debrief, talk to them about what went on, if there were any challenges, you know, any questions that came up that they would want to talk about. So just keep that in mind in terms of how you're engaging with the data collectors. All right, any questions on the skip logic or the Kobo form?
No, I think it's okay.
Great. So in terms of planning, let's first look at the administration guidance so that we're all on the same page. And again, this has been added to the PowerPoint, but for some reason I can't share a link. It's just not uploading on my machine. There's probably something wrong with my connection to the shared drive. But I will share this with everyone after the session. All right. So we're going to go through basically the administration guidance that we would use with the enumerators, and then we'll talk about planning. So we'll spend the next 15 minutes on this, and then make sure we take a break as well. So again, this is administration guidance. We want to make sure that each data collector or assessor understands how to conduct a child-friendly assessment. This is very important because we're asking questions about children's feelings, you know, we're asking questions about children's experiences, and we want to make sure that children feel comfortable telling us that information. So this group discussion, which you can have with data collectors and we can have with each other, is to first identify the data collectors who have participated in an assessment like this. So maybe they've done a learning assessment, or maybe they've even done a survey with children. So that gives us some information about their experience. And then we ask them some child-friendly practices that we can use when collecting data from children. So I'm going to ask you that. What are some practices that would be child-friendly that would help build rapport with children during and before the ISELA assessment? I also put the question I am asking you in the chat. Please feel free to come off mute, raise your hand, or just put your thoughts in the chat. Has no one here worked with children before? How do you make a child feel comfortable? I am seeing no responses. I have stumped you. There are no ideas here. I can give you some.
I think
Yes. Go ahead.
I think for a child to attract their mind, I think playing with them, spending some time with them, or sometimes talk to them, make them some more like making them comfortable by talking with them, or Yeah, this is how I think.
We added one
Exactly.
thing with Naurin Appa.
Yes.
Always interview in a open place, not in a closed room. So it's very important when to create child-friendly environment actually.
Yes.
Exactly.
Sometimes like
Yes.
yes. I mean like okay.
And another point add with you when we take an interview, that time just this is not a assessment, this is not a exam. I just play with you, I just gossiping with you, like that.
Yeah, just to
So
make
rapport,
them feel comfortable. Yes. Yes.
like right,
I think.
right. So this is the method to rapport building with children or before during the assessment. Ellie can add more.
Yeah, no, those are all great examples. I'm putting them in the chat as well. So asking them questions, playing with them, talking with them, getting to know them. And then, yes, we definitely want to be interviewing them in a comfortable space. So that means no closed doors, not isolating them. You want them to be in eyesight of other people, preferably other adults, so that they know that they're in a safe place.
Yes.
Yeah, and Disha asking them things about like what they like to do, what they're going to do today, and then explaining to them the purpose, that this isn't a test, that they understand that they can stop at any time.
Free to.
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
yeah, great. So these are examples. So you can do this brainstorm activity with the data collectors as well, so that they feel confident in these. And really what we're trying to do is establish a relaxed and playful rapport. I've also seen data collectors sing songs with the children. And that helps because then they're like, they seem like sort of teacher figures who are coming in and playing with them, and aren't like testing
Yes,
them.
exactly. Sometimes sharing some same interests together can be build some help to rapid building, I think.
Yeah, and one of the things, if the children in your sample like to play football, especially the boys,
Yes.
that
Mm-hmm.
kick a ball around or bring a ball with you that you can like throw around with them, that can be something to do as a game to play with them ahead
Yes.
of time. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Great. Yeah, so we have here some other examples. And then again, the finding a comfortable, quiet, and safe place is very important. So we do need it to be a quiet space because we need to be able to hear the child. And especially for young children, even 8-year-olds, they may speak very quietly. So in those cases, we want to be in a quiet place, maybe not in the middle of a classroom, but we do want to also be in a space that's safe. So ideally outside, if it's raining or bad weather, then doing something where there's, an open door or underneath like a roof, but maybe that's open air and visible. That's all very important. And then what should data collectors not do during the assessment? Does anyone have any ideas about things that the enumerators should avoid?
Uh, First,
I mean, talk to
first
them
thing.
rudely.
Mm,
I mean,
mm.
since they're a child, we shouldn't talk to them rudely, and we're supposed to be talk to them very quietly. And okay, that's it.
And not to say them it is a examination. This is a big survey and many question asked to you. This should avoid uh, by the enumerator when interview.
Great, those are all great examples. Yes, and so again, you can ask this question to the data collectors to make sure that they understand. So one of the things we haven't mentioned is teach. So one of the challenges as adults we have when working with children is we want them to be correct. We want to help them get the quote unquote correct response. That's not the goal of ISELA. We just want to know what they know, what their experiences are, and what they do in certain situations. That doesn't mean that we want them all to have the correct and appropriate responses. We don't want to guide them towards what we think they should do or say. We want to just have them respond honestly to the questions. So we should not teach the children new things during the assessment. Intimidate. So we've talked about that. So speaking, sorry, yes, go ahead.
Oh, that means there's nothing correct answer. There's nothing called correct answer. There has to be some answer they need to answer. That's it. So
Exactly.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
During,
And we've talked a lot.
Yes, sorry.
So no, go ahead.
I want to add something with Noreen Appa again. Enumerator always keep in mind they should not say it to the children you are correct or you are not correct, and you cannot do it like that. Yeah. You do mistake, like that, and always should enumerator should the children always appreciate when during the interview.
Yes,
Thank you.
very good. Very good points. So we definitely don't want to be openly correcting mistakes or even telling the child like, yes, you're right. What we want to be doing is just saying like, thank you, you're doing a good job, keep it up. Things that are neutral but supportive. Yeah, that's great. We've talked about intimidation. We definitely don't want to be rude or yell or try to force a child to start the assessment or to finish an item. They can stop at any time. If they're unable to answer a question, that's just what they're unable to do. And that's fine. We just mark it as incorrect, do not know, and move on. Yeah, and saying things like great, good job, as they're moving through the assessment. And at no point should data collectors scold or punish the child. So children, especially you're working with a rough age, 8 to 14-year-olds, they can be sassy. They can say things that are rude. They can, say, I don't want to participate in this. This is dumb. They can be very, if they're feeling comfortable, they can be very opinionated. If the enumerator feels offended by the child, it doesn't matter. They're the adults. They cannot scold or punish the child. They just say, all right, thank you for your time, and let them go. Yeah.
Exactly. That's the thing. I think to deal with a child, this is very important, I think. I mean, they don't actually know what they're saying because they're a child. So as an adult, they should keep their mind how to talk to them properly. So yeah.
Exactly. And that's really important that you talk with the data collectors about that. So, we're experts in this room, but the data collectors may not have had the same amount of experience that you've had. So just make sure that they understand how to interact with children in a supportive way. And that they are the adults.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So in the data collector training, make sure that you practice this. Have them break up into pairs and practice building rapport where one of them acts as the child and one of them acts as the data collector. And then have them switch. Just to build that rapport, think about things that they could do, that they could ask. We won't practice in our, our TOT here, but yeah, that's a really important thing to practice with the data collectors. All right, so the administration. We've talked now about building rapport, helping the child feel comfortable. This is also in the enumerator training guide that I will share with you. But basically, we need pretty minimal materials. We just need the tablet or the phone with the Kobo form. We need a pencil and paper so that the child can draw, and then the enumerator can take notes if they need to. And the picture cards. Thank you, Yusuf, for the time check. Let me just finish this slide, I think, and then we can move on. They also need the printed assessment so that they have that as a reference for themselves. They may not use it, but they need to have the document itself, even if they're using it only during the training. Who should be the data collectors? So it can be teachers. If it's teachers, though, make sure it's teachers who the children do not know. So if it's the child's teacher, for example, then they already have a relationship, which may bias the results. If it's a community member who the child knows, maybe it's a family member. That happens sometimes when we recruit data collectors from the population that we're sampling from. They should not be assessing the child that they know. They should be assessing a child who they do not know and do not have a pre-existing relationship, because it will change the responses. You all could also be data collectors if you need to have staff doing the data collection, and other trained staff. Any questions on the administration, adaptation, or rapport building that we've talked about so far? Or other comments?
No, I think everything's clear now.
Great.
Yeah,
Yusuf,
no
I heard
question.
you chuckle. Great.
No question. No question. We all are clear.
Okay, great. Yeah, so let's break for 10 minutes. I will set a timer, and I'll come back, and then we'll continue the administration and adaptation, and go over the enumerator planning and training planning. All right, looking forward to talking with you
Okay.
all. Let's take a 10-minute break.
We'll back 7:40, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
It would be 40 after the hour my time.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, let's have break for 10 minutes. Thank
Great,
you.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We should be coming back now as you all, excuse me, are coming back. I do have a little logistics question. In terms of file size, this PowerPoint I have is quite large. Would it be easier for downloads if I divided it into separate files?
Yes, that would be much handy for us, I think. Yes.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that. Yeah. And also in terms of logistics, I need to make sure I have all of your emails because I don't actually think I do. And I want to make sure I can share these resources as well as you can reach out to me. So at some point in the rest of the session, whether now or at the end, if you can put your email in the chat, or you can, if you don't want to share it with the whole group, you can also just email me directly. Some of you already have with your homework. But that way I can make sure you all get the resources. All right. Well, let's keep going. I know we have a couple people back, and so I'm hoping that we have everyone. We're on administration and adaptation, and so this is about working with the enumerators in terms of their, use of the tool and how they're going to be using it. So, working with the child throughout the assessment. The enumerators need to make sure that they have the picture cards prepared in advance. And so this is partly on us. We need to make sure we've printed a few copies of the picture cards for each enumerator. I say a few copies because, as you know, paper can get damaged. So you want to make sure they have some copies that they can use. The enumerators also need to make sure that they have them out. So they don't want to be, shuffling through papers and taking a lot of time away from the assessment with the child. So they have everything ready to go as soon as they sit with the child. We've talked about the location of the assessment, making sure that it's in a calm, and quiet, and safe place. And then one of the also important things is that the enumerator should pay attention to how the child is doing. Halfway through the assessment, they may get tired and they may start staring off into space or like playing with their, thumbnail or something like that. And the data collector can offer a break. Say like, let's take, we can take a 5-minute break and you can come back, or do you want to keep going? And so they can offer breaks at any time during the assessment. They also need to score each item as they go, but do it discreetly. So one of the things that we want to make sure is that the child is not looking over the shoulder of the enumerator and seeing that they're being marked as incorrect, because that's going to make them feel bad, and then they might shut down and not want to participate. And so just making sure that the enumerators are scoring each question, but that the child can't see what is being scored. And that will help, make sure that they're confident. The other really important point, and we talked about this yesterday, is that they should not change the language of the question. So this is one reason the translation is so important, because the language of the questions needs to be the same for each child. If we make the question more simple for one child and make it more complex for another, then it's going to bias the results. And it will be unfair to the children. So if they need to rephrase, make sure that you have alternate wording that would be appropriate that you have talked about in the training. When we're looking at the translation, which you all will be looking at, I don't know Bangla, so I won't be much help. But when you're looking at the translation, make sure that that is as child-friendly as possible. And if there are changes that you need to make, discuss with each other, because we have different organizations that are going to be doing this data collection, right? And you all, regardless of your organization, need to be having the same questions, the same wording throughout. So some of this will fall back on us as Save the Children, but also we want to make sure that you all are using the exact same wording and that the data collectors are using the exact same wording. All right, and then we've talked about this, offering consistent but neutral encouragement. So great job, you're working very hard, keep it up. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with me can also be a really useful thing to say, especially because we're talking about things like, children being upset or children getting in fights. So you want to make sure that the child feels like it's appreciated what they're saying. Don't give hints. So the data collectors should not be like trying to get them to get the correct answer, but they should also not be making facial expressions like laughing at the child or like shaking their head that the child didn't get it correct. It's just making sure that the data collectors are as neutral, but also supportive as possible. And just being positive, especially this age group, 8 to 14, they have a lot to say. So, being positive, being supportive, and being patient, because they might, an 8-year-old might start telling you a story about a time that they got in a fight with a friend in the conflict resolution section. And so the data collector should listen to the story, even if it's not answering the question, they should listen to the story and not interrupt them. Now, this is an important point, and we didn't really talk about it too much yesterday, though you can see the probes in the tool itself. Probing and repeating the questions are critical in how we use the tool, but we need to know when it's appropriate. So if we repeat the question like 8 times for one child, and we only repeat it, or we don't repeat it at all for another, that might bias towards an incorrect response for the one we don't repeat at all, and a correct response for the child who we repeat the question 8 times to. So we need to make that consistent. So the guidelines are that we wait 5 seconds. So let me say why we probe first. So we probe specifically for clarification. So if this child says something that we don't hear, or if the answer is unclear. So in the example where, let's say we're in a loud room, we're sitting in a corner, but there's an echo and we can't hear the child well, making sure that you ask them to repeat that. I didn't hear you. And then when the child gives a response that you're not sure how to score, so the example here is like, how many people do you live with? And the child says, I live with my family. And then you can say, how many people are in your family? And the question is actually, who do you live with? So I'll need to revise that. But then the child would, how many people are in your family? That gives you, the information that you need. Now this is the repeats. So you may repeat each question only once. And the reason we do this is because sometimes, children take some time to think. And we want to make sure that they're taking time to think and they heard the question. So repeat each question once if the child does not respond the first time, or the child demonstrates that they misunderstood the question. So in the example with conflict resolution, you ask them, what would you do? And the child starts telling a story about something that happened to them, which isn't answering the question. So you let them, tell their story, and then you go back to the question and you can repeat it again. Or, of course, if the child is like, what? And asks you to repeat the question. So when you repeat, you wait 5 seconds before repeating the question. So if the child stays quiet, if the child tells the story, you still wait 5 seconds after they finish the story so that you have that time for them to think back to the question. Give them that chance to answer the question. So you wait that 5 seconds, and then if it's unclear, the child did not respond, repeat the question once. Is there a question or comment? No. So this is important that the enumerators do this to standardize. The other thing is that sometimes children stay quiet when they do not know the answer. So we score a silent response as incorrect do not know, not no response. This is very important because a lot of data collectors will think that if the child doesn't respond to the question, then you mark it as no response. But actually, the only time you mark no response is when the child refuses to answer the question. In that case, they have decided to skip that question, or that they have ended the assessment early, and they have verbally told the data collector that they do not want to answer that question or skip it, or I don't want to tell you that. So that's when you would mark the no response. When the child stays quiet, you wait 5 seconds, repeat the question, wait 5 seconds. If they still have not responded to the question, you mark it as incorrect, do not know, and move on. And again, this isn't telling us that the child, we're just marking basically that the child is not displaying a response. All right. We do not probe or repeat if the child has provided the incorrect response. That is appropriate for the question. So let's say we show the picture of the crying child. The one that the child that we're interviewing says that they are happy. That's an incorrect response. So we would just mark it as incorrect and move on. And then if you've already repeated or probed once and have waited 5 seconds, then you're done. There's no more repeating. There's no more probing. All right. Any questions on that before we get to the incorrect, refused, skipped? This is just very important to go over with the data collectors so that they understand how to administer the assessment. For the incorrect, refused, skipped, again, just to emphasize this, if the child stays quiet, that would be marked as incorrect, refused, skipped. I mean, incorrect, sorry. For refused, skipped, the child has actually refused to participate or respond to the question. That does not mean they've just stayed quiet. That means that they have said, I don't want to tell you, or skip. They might actually just say skip. Whatever that indicates the child is not going to answer that, or if the child has ended the assessment. Any questions on that? All right. Moving along. So then we would do group work. So in the data collector training, which we will update, we won't be doing this together, but in the data collector training, we would do as much practice as you can. So they would go through the entire assessment in pairs. The first time they do it, they write down any questions that they have and identify any translation issues that may come up. And then after you've gone through the assessment with the data collectors, they've practiced it with each other. You come back together and discuss those questions and those translation concerns. And again, up until the first day of data collection, you can change the wording as long as the meaning of the questions remains. So if you think of a better word for hope in Bangla, please use the better word that's more child-friendly. But if they want to use the formal, something that you might only hear in school or something that isn't the way normal people talk, remind the data collectors that they should be using child-friendly language. The assessment should be written in a way that children will understand all of the questions. All right, any questions on that section before we move on?
Oh, please, we understand actually.
Great, thank you, Yusa. So in preparation, so these are the things that you do, not the data collectors, prior to the assessment. So of course, organize the logistics. So you need to procure all of the materials. If you're procuring new tablets, printing all of the materials, any of that needs to be done ahead of time. You also need refreshments if you're providing refreshments. If you are not providing refreshments, then some children shouldn't get refreshments, whereas others do. So just make sure that that's consistent so that everyone receives the same thing. And then, of course, the travel. So the logistics for travel is important. I don't know in your context if you'll be providing travel to the data collectors or if you'll be expecting them to travel themselves, but whatever it is, make sure that you all know how the data collectors will get to the locations that they need to be at for the data collection. You also, on your side, need to get the required permissions. So the data collectors should not be the one getting permissions from anyone. The permission should already have been received at the time the data collectors go out. Unless you are doing a household assessment, in which case the data collectors can get parental permission right on the spot. I do not believe any of you are doing a household assessment. If you are, let me know. But so this means making sure that you have the consent from the center and the school, and that you have the parent and caregiver consent. You can get consent over the phone, and you can get consent in paper form. There's something called passive consent, where you send a document home with the child, and if the for the parents to review. And if the parent does not want their child to participate, then they send it back. If the parent does, then they just don't respond, or if they don't mind. So the consent process, I will leave to the team to decide. It should be consistent, and you need to get parental or caregiver consent, as well as if you're working in a school or center, the consent of the head teacher or the principal or whoever is in charge there, so that they know you're coming. We've had that happen before, where the school didn't know that we were coming. And so we get there to assess children, and we're interrupting their day, and they didn't have any idea that we'd be there. So just make sure that everyone is aware of what's going on and they have consented. And then the other thing that we need to do on our side, some of which we'll do tomorrow and some of which will continue to be developed, is the data collection timeline. So when you will be conducting the enumerator training, when the data collectors will be practicing the tool, and when they will be collecting data itself. And then the other piece is creating assessor teams. So this is really useful because if we have a wide area, all of the assessors can't work in the same location. So let's say we have 20 assessors, we make teams of 4, 5 teams of 4. And so one of the assessors you've identified as a team leader of that 4, and that person is the one that you meet with as staff. You can also set it up where you meet with all of the assessors. It's just having a team lead can be really helpful. And you can identify that team lead during the assessor training. Maybe it's someone you've worked with before. Maybe it's someone who obviously has a lot of experience. Someone who's doing well during the training and feels confident in the tool. But it is important to have those teams when you're working in a variety of locations. All right, for preparation, again, you have to have all of these materials prepared.
I have
Yeah.
a question. I
Yes,
have a
please, go
question
ahead.
about consent. You know, consent is very important part. Over phone consent is allowable? No.
Yes, phone consent is allowable as long as yes, it is. You can use the phone.
Yeah, we use the phone, but we should need paper-based consent, written consent. No.
Ideally, you would do written. Ideally, you would do written, but you don't have to. If you do verbal consent, that's okay. I don't know this context, but sometimes caregivers have very low literacy, so written can be not as useful as verbal.
So, so finally, both
Actually,
are allowable,
when
right?
actually
Better
when
is.
no, I mean when we are talking about school or any sort of consent from principal, we actually made the MOU before uh, making any sort of program or anything like that. After that, when we actually we go for the assessment part, we take consent over phone, or sometimes we go there on spot to talk or something like that. So yeah.
But my question, I have another question. When we conduct a assessment with youth or children, adolescent, we need to permission from the parents, right?
Yes.
is it this permission we will collect actually by written, but from now we can collect a permission from over phone?
You can do a verbal consent over the phone with the parents. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's very clear.
Yes.
So
And if you,
I think verbally we are collect the permission from their guardians, so it is not a problem. But it is need to document it.
yes, you should basically have a tracker where you mark who has provided permission. That way you're not accidentally assessing a child whose a caregiver or guardian did not provide permission.
Yes.
Yes,
So
and if you already have existing MOUs with the schools, then it would be, you would just need to double check to make sure that you have the consent to go and do the data collection. But yes, you should have the MOU to even be conducting programming with the schools. So hopefully that already exists.
So
Or
written
is-
consent is better. Always
Yes,
better
yes.
than.
Yes, we already have that. Yeah.
Yeah, and with the schools, I mean, again, written consent is ideal. But with the schools, it should be easy to get written consent because everyone will be able to read the form and be able to provide the written consent. With the guardians, you may find
Yes,
the
it's really
literacy rate
hard
is lower.
to
Yeah,
collect them to get any sort of written format documentation. Yes.
yeah. So the verbal is fine as long as you have verbal. All right. Any other questions on that?
Question? No. Thank you so much.
Great. So the other thing you need to do is have all the materials ready for the enumerators. So we have here including like color pencils, something to draw with for the child. If you just have a pencil, that's fine. But children like to use colors when they're drawing and it can be more fun for them. Something to write on. So that's important for the assessors so that they are not, trying to write on their lap or the child is trying to write on their lap when they're drawing. So a folder, something hard, and provide that to the assessor so they're ready to go prior to data collection. Yeah, make the materials pack for each. So before the assessment, this is for the data collectors themselves. So they need to make sure that it's a calm and quiet environment, away from other adults and children, but within eyesight of either other assessors or other adults or other children, so that the child is not isolated. And that is protected from rain, from wind, from inclement weather. The seating arrangement, this is also part of rapport building. So let's say an assessor is assessing an 8-year-old and they do not have chairs. Then the assessor is much taller than the 8-year-old. And so they're speaking from a high place down to a low place. And that's, putting a power dynamic. So they need to be sitting. And they need to be sitting at the same level as the child. So this might be on the ground. It might be on chairs, it might be on stools, anything that is available. If it's on the ground, one of the things I've seen is assessors bring like a blanket or a cloth to sit on, just so that they don't have to sit on the ground. So that's also before the assessment, and this is important for the assessors to know as well. Introduce yourself. Obviously, we've talked about the rapport building, help the child see the assessment as a game, not a test. And so we've talked a lot about the relaxed and playful rapport. This is just, it's here again so that you emphasize it with the data collectors. This is so important because if the child does not feel comfortable with the data collectors, you will not get good data. They need to feel comfortable. They need to be able to respond to the questions. They're speaking to an adult that they do not know. For 14-year-olds, that might be easy. For 8-year-olds, that might be hard. So there needs to be a lot of rapport building so that the child feels comfortable. So just emphasize that with the enumerators. During the assessment, the enumerator should be marking as they go. So that's all this slide is about, is making sure that the enumerator is not skipping questions because then they'll have to go back. The other thing that's important, and we didn't talk about this when we looked at the COBO, but that there's 2 types of instructions in the COBO form. Instructions in bold means that that is what the assessor says to the child out loud. So we want to make sure, again, that all of the assessors are saying the questions in the same way. And so that's why it's indicated what you say. The assessor should not tell the child what materials they need, for example, or the other instructions that are in the assessment, and those are in italics. So those should not be read aloud to the child. That may sound intuitive, but you will be surprised. During the assessment, we've talked about this, consistent neutral encouragement, use the 5-second rule. Do not give hints to the questions and observe the child and offer breaks. Score each question as you go. Take the time to review the survey before you let the child return to class or return to the center. Remember that the refuse to answer or no response should be used very rarely. Only when the child literally refuses, verbally refuses to answer the question. If the child says, I don't know, or shrugs, or stays quiet, then that will be marked as incorrect, do not know. The skip logic is built in. We've talked about that a lot today. The skip logic does change for each child, because if one child is able to answer all of the self-concept questions, but another child cannot think of a hope for their future. So that will be a different skip than the one who answers all the questions. So that's just important that the enumerator knows that, like, oh, wait, but I'm supposed to ask the next question. No, they only ask the next question based off of the response to the previous. And one of the reasons we have this skip logic is to reduce the stress we're putting on the child. We don't want to be asking them questions that they clearly cannot answer based off of their previous response. After the assessment, again, the data collectors should check before they let the child return to class. And then if they're using a paper form, they should return the response sheet to their supervisor or the team lead. If they're using the tablet, they just need to submit. If you are providing refreshment, provide it after the assessment. And then the enumerator should also make sure that the child returns to class safely. So let's say you're doing the assessment in the playground, on the other side of the playground, and class is, over on the other side, walk them back to class. All right, any questions on this administration guidance before we go to some examples? Great. So these are some scenarios that are useful to use with the data collectors so that they can plan on what they would do in different environments, what would happen. So in this example, you sit down with the child and you start ISELA, and the child, this is an 8-year-old boy, and you ask him about his experience with people yelling and shouting at home, and he starts crying. What do you do? Please unmute, add in the chat. What would you do if the child starts crying?
I will try to make her stop the cry, and yeah.
Yeah, so help them calm down. Give them some water. That's a good idea. Maybe it's invite them to take some deep breaths. Offer them a break.
Yes.
Like, we don't need to continue right
Maybe
now.
maybe sitting with them for 5 to 10 minutes, so that they can calm down for a while and then talk to them.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to talk to them, ask them, why are you crying, right? Because we don't want to put them on the spot. And the data collectors will not be trained as, child protection experts. And maybe the child has experienced abuse. So we want to make sure that we're helping them calm down. We're giving them a break. We're offering them water, and we're allowing them to stop. The other thing
like
you can do,
like
yeah,
they
go
should
ahead.
be there on like they should stop on with on their own space, you know, like we should be there just there standing, like they should be there on their own, and they should stop crying, and then maybe we should give them some water and, you know, just take your time and be yourself and something like that.
Yeah, and ask them if they want to continue. They may not want to because they got upset and they don't want to keep, you know, answering questions, and that's okay.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Especially younger children may feel like they have to continue because they're talking to an adult, but they don't have to. Even if we tell them that they don't have to, we have to remind them, like, you know, we can take a break. You can stop. You know, let them know that they are, if they're upset, they do not need to continue. The other thing that's important is if, you know, there's a teacher, you might want to tell them that, you know, this child got upset. They may not be feeling well. They wanted to end the assessment early. Just wanted to let you know that they got upset during the assessment when I asked this question. Great. Oh, it got more complicated. After several minutes, the boy has not calmed down. He keeps crying and says he wants to see his mother. What do you do? At this point, I would end the assessment. I mean, he's not calmed down.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
He
don't
says he
think
wants to see his
he
mother.
won't stop, I think, for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. At this point, you would end the assessment or at least say, okay, we'll stop now. Let him return to class, help him calm down, and then alert the teacher to what's going on. And then he might, you know, calm down and in the afternoon want to finish the assessment. But if he's unable to calm down, then you're done. You can't keep asking him questions.
Ellie, in this situation, we can we present his or her mother during interview that time?
Only if you're doing like a household assessment and the mother is close by. Yeah, if you're doing something where you're at the school, maybe his home is, you know, far away, he can't walk home.
Yeah.
Then you wouldn't be
Sometimes
able
it's not
to.
possible, right? Yeah, sometimes it's
Yeah.
not possible.
Yeah. All right.
But when possible, we can allow them, right? We can allow.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
possible. Okay.
Yeah. Again, that's why you would tell the teacher too, to let them know. So maybe the teacher will say, okay, you can go home this afternoon because you're very upset and you keep wanting to see your mother. You know, it's time for you to go home.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So this scenario is a little bit easier. You have a 10-year-old girl during the assessment. You notice that she is having a hard time concentrating. She keeps looking away and asking you to repeat the questions. What do you do?
We have to repeat. Other than that, it will be difficult to continue.
Yes. So make sure though that you're only repeating once, because that you can't repeat the question 8 times for this girl and only once for the boy. I would offer the girl a break. She's having trouble focusing. You know, let her know we can take a break. We can come back. If she keeps asking for you to repeat the questions, is really having a hard time concentrating, you know, offer her some water, something that will help her, you know, relax or focus. Yeah. And she might have to go to the bathroom, you know, it might be something simple. Yeah. All right. So you just finished the self-concept drawing activity. The 12-year-old boy that you are assessing refuses to return the pencil and paper and just continues drawing random things. He refuses to continue the survey and says he just wants to draw. What do you do?
I will let him draw, I think.
Exactly. You let him
Agree,
draw.
agree with you.
He's refused to continue the survey. You say thank you. You can keep drawing, and end the assessment and mark, no response on the remaining questions. That's fine. Again,
And
it
after
it's not.
drawing, let him go to classroom, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's not bad if the child wants to end the assessment early. That just means that they're done. We're not going to pressure them to keep going. Nazma, did you have something? I saw you unmuted.
No, it's okay.
Okay. So these scenarios are really useful to go over with the data collectors because, like, as we're talking, we're coming up with ideas of how we can help the child feel more comfortable. This one, again, we're looking at a girl asks for a break. You offer her a break, and then she says, "I don't want to answer any more questions. I'm tired." Again, you can end the assessment. Doesn't matter at what point. If they agree to participate, and then you get to the risk questions, which are the first section, and they want to stop, they're done.
In this case, we should stop the survey actually because he is very
Yes.
tired.
Yeah, exactly.
He needs give us some break.
Yeah, exactly. We would stop at this point. All right, and then just a reminder again that we do as much role play as possible. Practice, practice, practice this assessment. Ideally, I would ask you to practice this assessment with a child in your life, maybe a neighbor, your own child, anyone. The more we practice this tool, the more confident we are in the data collection. For the data collectors, this is extremely important. Throughout the training, you need to give them opportunities to practice, both with each other and then at the end with children. All right, so the field test. We have at least one practice day during the enumerator training. So when you're planning the enumerator training, make sure that the last day or the last 2 days of the training, the data collectors actually go out and use the assessment with children. So again, very important that they have this opportunity to practice with children before data collection so that they feel very confident in the tool. And if they have questions that come up, things that surprise them, they can talk to you about it at the end of the day. So this is called the field test, where we're field testing the tool prior to data collection. So we need to practice in pairs as well as individually. So when we're working in pairs, one is the speaker and one is the listener, and they're both marking the responses. And then one is the speaker and one is the listener, and they're both marking the responses. What's important here is that you are assessing different children when they're working in pairs, so that they don't assess this boy twice with one speaking and the other speaking. You assess this boy, one is speaking, one is listening. You assess this girl, the other is speaking, the other is listening. Is that clear?
Clear, clear.
Okay. I've had enumerators not mark, who are the ones who are listening. I've had them not mark, which is a problem. I've also had them assess the same child twice, which is also a problem because it's, unnecessary, and we don't want children to be put under additional stress. So just making sure that they understand very clearly what is expected of them. And then after the assessment, the enumerators can talk to each other. They should not change their responses, but they can talk about what happened, what was surprising, what worked well, and go through the different sections if they're seeing issues with the translation or the wording, and mark those down so that you can discuss them after the field test day. And then they should be paired with a different assessor and do the same again, where they switch, and each assess a different child, and do pair work. During the field test, they also should have a chance to practice on their own. So they should practice both as listening and as speaking in pairs, and they should practice individually. So they have that chance to practice. So that means that if you have 20 assessors on the practice day, let's see, you need to have one child so that they can all practice individually. So that's 20 children. And then you need to have a child for them to practice in pairs once as speaker. So that's 10. And then you need another 10 for them to all practice once as listener. So you would need at least 40 children for the practice day. Is that clear? If you had 20 enumerators. Any questions on the practice day? What might come up in the field test, the child might not agree to participate. That's fine. They can just be assigned another child and continue in the same roles for the new child. We still need parental consent for the practice days. So make sure that the children that you are practicing with, you have consent to assess, as well as assent from the child. Yeah, and so ideally, each assessor would have had a chance to conduct the assessment with 2 children and listen to the assessment with 2 children. And I would say also conduct the assessment individually with at least 1 child. And we learn about, what works, what challenges the enumerators are having, and we're able to identify if there's any remaining issues with the tool itself regarding the language or the skip logic or whatever, so that we're able to then make any changes and finalize the tool before data collection. All right, any questions on the field test before we move on? This is about analysis. Okay. So the analysis pieces, it's really important that we have a translated and tested tool with the assessors, that we know what our sample is prior to data collection. So right now, I don't know what our sample is. So we'll need to figure that out. We can talk hopefully more about the sampling either at the end of today or tomorrow. We also need to practice that reliability. That's when they're working in pairs and they need to enter data. And then at the ends, we need to make sure that we're interpreting the data. We are sharing information back with the community that we're collecting the data from. So one of the sampling methods, so again, we'll talk more about what our sample looks like once we know what the population is, but these sampling methods can be used with ISELA. So you can do a non-random sample, which would mean a convenience sample or a purposive sample. A convenience sample means that we're just identifying children who we can reach. And so that, biases our sample a little bit, but in some cases, we're not able to randomly sample children. A purposeful sample means that we're identifying children for a specific reason. So maybe we're identifying an equal number of girls and boys, and because of that, we're not able to randomly sample of girls and boys. That would be a purposeful sample. A maximum variation means we want to have actually a broad understanding of the different variations. So maybe we're sampling evenly by age, for example. Or the criterion, that would be the girls and the boys. We're using a criteria to define our non-random sample. Snowball, we likely wouldn't use, but it would be like we would ask someone to refer us to the children. It would be it is the least recommended form of non-random sampling, because it's going to basically, like if we ask the teacher to identify children for us to sample, then they're going to give us the children who are performing best in class, which is not going to give us the information that we need. Random sampling is what we want. So ideally, we would sample randomly from the population in the Skills to Succeed program. A simple random sample is just a random sample of all children. A stratified sample is by location, where maybe we're sampling from the north and sampling from the south. A cluster random sample would be by location and by like school. So we're clustering at the school level. A multi-stage sample might combine all of these in one way or another. Any questions on sampling methods? I know this is very brief, but we have meal staff here who are very familiar with sampling. Okay. So once we know the population, we'll be able to identify the sample. So next steps, we need to finalize the tool. So some of the conversations we've had today, I will go through and make some edits to the Kobo form. But you all need to review these items, make sure that this is appropriate. The pictures of the crying and the angry child, we all need to be using the same pictures. So we need to agree on what are the appropriate crying and angry child pictures. And I will leave that to you to do. The translation. Now, this is very important. Do we have the lead who will be coordinating the translation on the call? Who is coordinating the translation? Do we know?
Yeah, we are coordinating and we are doing this translation, and one version already done.
Oh, great. So does that mean you're just reviewing that translation now?
Yes.
I would recommend that you share that with everyone in this group so that you all can review and provide comments prior to data collection. I mean, prior to even a numerator training.
Okay, already this is shared with all.
Excellent.
Yes.
All right. Well, on my ends, if you can share the final translation after your review. So again, you may make edits to this as you move forward. I can put it into the Kobo for you, or I have actually developed the Kobo form and can just share that form with you and you can enter in the translation.
Yeah, and you can share this Excel template, not a file, Excel file for Kobo. Then we can use this questionnaire.
Yeah, I'll do that. That sounds good. Okay. And then of course, pilot testing, we've talked a lot about that. All right, so we've talked about inter-rater reliability a few times today and yesterday. It can be a complex topic for data collectors who have never been exposed to it before, but basically what we want to know is the correlation between how different assessors are scoring the same child's responses on an assessment so that we can be confident that the assessors are collecting the information in a reliable way. So you see the little bullseyes on below. So something that is reliable is hitting the target. We're hitting the target again and again and again, and valid. If it's reliable and not valid, that means that all of the assessors are collecting the information in the same way, but we're not actually collecting what the child says, which is also a problem. But we're not able to test that in the same way. And so that's why we do the pair work in order to give us that reliability. Are we hitting the bullseye? And again, we've talked about this a lot. The assessors work with the same child at the same time, and both people score the child's responses. I'm emphasizing this because I've had assessors, I've had a lot of trouble with this in the past in multiple different assessments. So it's just really important that the assessors understand the pair work. Assessors can discuss the differences in their scoring and come to a common agreement about how to correctly score each item, but they should do that after they've submitted the assessment so that they do not change their answers to match one another. Because what we want is to review and see if there are any disagreements and then address those disagreements to help the assessors know how to score those responses. So something I have done in the past is during the practice day, I'll review the data coming in from Kobo and look at the pair work and then identify what were the commonly missed questions and literally talk to each assessor and say, you disagreed on this question. What did the child say? And then discuss what would be the correct response. And then we've already discussed that 10% of the sample should be conducted in pairs, the first child of every day in data collection. Any questions on inter-rater reliability? Great.
No questioner IRR, but two enumerator there, but one is asking question, or two simultaneously can ask question.
Only one is speaking. The other one should not ask a single question. They should stay
Okay.
quiet the entire time. No, it's a good question. That will come up.
Okay, thank you.
All right. One thing to just remember that, anytime we do data entry and data collection, there's potential error. The tablets and the Kobo form can help us reduce that, but it will not eliminate it. So, we can accidentally put in the wrong response when we meant to put correct, but it was actually, but we actually put in incorrect. So the reason that we use Kobo is to try to minimize that. We definitely need to explain what the purpose of the study is. And so that's really important for the data collectors to know so that they can explain it when they're doing the data collection. And then we want to de-identify the data. So on our side, very few of you should be able to access the raw data. Ideally, only the person analyzing the data would be able to access the identifiable information, because we just want to reduce the number of people who are seeing that identifiable information. Even if, nothing comes of it, it's just to protect the individual identifiable information. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, great. Again, you've done this with other assessments. All right, and that is the full slide deck. So we've gone through a lot today. Any questions on what we've gone through so far? While I pull up the enumerator training guide. I will share this whole folder with you as well, once my internet is working. Yeah, Nazma, go ahead.
So it's okay, but if you send us this all the materials, so it will be helpful for us to remember and follow the steps accordingly.
Yes, excellent. I am, if you can share with me your emails, so maybe one person from each team sends me the list of emails or CCs everyone. You can also put your email in the chat. I think I saw, yeah, Disha has already done that. So please do send me your emails, because I don't actually have all of your emails.
Okay.
And I can share all of this with you. That's why I created the folder.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to go through the enumerator training guide, and this is really to help you plan the enumerator training. We have some time left, so we may as well get through this. So this guide is broken out, and it gives you sample timelines, what you need to consider about hiring enumerators, all of that. So who we should be using this guide. I'll need to update this. So it's about ISELA A, but it's mostly still accurate. Thank you for adding your emails. Melissa is here. I didn't know you were
sorry,
here,
I'm here. Yeah, sorry, I had another appointment, so I joined a little late, but I've been listening in.
Great. So the enumerator training guide lays out, who should be using this. That's you, because you're trained. And then the components of the goals of the enumerator training, this is all in the slide deck as well. The key components to the enumerator training. So going through that slide deck, or the multiple slide decks, I'm going to break it apart so that it's easier to download, so that the enumerators understand well how to administer the tool. The classroom practice, and again, practice, practice, practice. The enumerators need to practice this tool as much as possible, and the field practice. So 6 to 8 children per enumerator. Ideally, you can get by with 4, but ideally it will be 6 to 8. And then preparing, we've gone over some of this from the slide deck, but making sure that we've hired external data collectors, research assistants. Our staff themselves are going to be doing data collection, and we've identified them and know that they have the time to do it. So it could be our staff who are involved. It could be education staff or teachers from different classes. We're not using the same teachers who teach the children, or any other service provider who might be in a position to use this tool. Sometimes we've worked with like students in college. They can be good data collectors because they're interested and engaged, and maybe they've worked with children in the past and have that experience. So the qualifications for an enumerator, you may already have a list of data collectors and feel free to draw from that. But if you do end up recruiting new data collectors, you want to make sure, of course, that they can commit to the timeline, both of the training and data collection, ideally for the base and end line. We would ideally work with the same enumerators at base and end line. They obviously need to be fluent in the language of the child. So if you have an enumerator who is not fluent in Bangla, which would be surprising, they should not be assessing the children. Minimum a high school graduate. If you can identify someone who is already, has a college degree, that would be preferable, but it's not a requirement. And that they enjoy working with children and know how to work with children. That's a really important piece of any assessment with children for data collectors. Yeah, so if you have a pre-existing pool or database, please use that. Feel free to work with enumerators you've collected data with in the past. And then we get into the planning. Does anyone have any questions or any comments on the enumerator recruitment process?
Mubashir bhai.
What was that? Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question for you. You know that in those schools we conduct training, all schools don't have code number. In first slide, in this tool, as we have to put code number, in that case, what will we do?
Code means youth ID or which code?
School code or center
or
code?
School code.
Yeah.
If we do not have school code, then we will put just 999. That means skipping.
Okay.
So the school code also is it? Sorry, go ahead.
Another we can manage that if we list our school list, then this school list number we can use.
Exactly. Yeah, so the school code is actually really not required. That one, it's there so that we can easily identify the schools in analysis, but we can actually auto-generate that after data collection. So as long as we have the school names and we're coding correctly what school we're working in, we don't need a school code. We can just do that after we've collected the data.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, if you already have a school code, we can also input that into the COBOL form. Okay. Any other questions on things we've gone over so far? Great. All right, so going back to the enumerator training guide. So planning for the training, we have a sample training schedule here, but you may have less time for the data collection. Ideally, it would be 5 days. You can do it in 3. Assume a 6 to 8 hour workday for the enumerators and try not to have disruptions for the training. And then in the sample schedule, make sure that you have a lunch break and a 15-minute break in the morning and in the afternoon for tea or for refreshment. And in the sample schedule, also think about what you need to cover, or in the enumerator training itself schedule, consider what you need to cover and how much time it might take. It is recommended, if you're using devices that you're providing for the data collectors, that you have already saved the tool to those devices. So to do that, you can just save a link. Oh, I think I have all of the emails now. Thank you, Melissa. I just got a message from you. If you save a link onto the device itself, that way the data collector can just open it. If the data collectors are using their own devices, have them save that link to their device so that they're not looking for the link when they're sitting with the child. And then if you're using any other assessment tools at the same time, maybe you're getting information from the school principal or something like that, just make sure that the data collectors have that. All right, the field practice, we've already gone over. The important thing here is that the practice sites are not the ones in the research study or in the evaluation. You want to make sure that they're separate schools, separate centers from where you'll actually be doing data collection. And you have identified those. And so depending on the size of the group of enumerators, you may have to divide different sites. You may need other sites. And again, I leave the site selection up to you and your teams because you know the context and know where you could do this work. Make sure, of course, you obtain a permissions. We've talked about that. And then if you're planning on photographing, taking any photographs during data collection, make sure that you have permission to do that as well. We've talked about all of this. Randomly select, and then also this is 6 to 12, but really what we need is 8 to 14. So for our practice, you want to be assessing children in the same age range as what you would do in the sample. So you don't want to have enumerators practicing this tool with 6-year-olds or with 18-year-olds. Make sure that they're practicing with the correct age range. And then, of course, making sure that they have all of the tools and the sheets and the materials that they need so that the data collectors can do the practice. Is it possible that children will be non-Bangla speakers or that children will not know Bangla in the sample or in the population?
In our case, if it is in the we have a camp called Janaba camp. It's a specialized area. There, if there is a sample for Janaba camp, it will be some difficult.
Yeah.
But they speak Bangla and they listen Bangla.
But listen Bangla, but most of the time they speak Urdu. And we have to
Okay.
But they understand Bangla.
They understand. Yes, they understand.
Yeah.
Okay, so if that's the case, then you can use Bangla to administer the assessment, but allow the child to respond in Urdu, which means your enumerators need to also understand Urdu so that they can correctly score the child. Yeah.
Exactly.
So consider that too. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. We've talked about all of this, the materials that they need. Other materials that may be useful, name tags. I've found that I've done a lot of workshops and things without name tags, and that can be frustrating because you're learning everyone's name at the same time as you're conducting the training. Here it's easy because your names appear in front of me. A projector and the slides so that you can go through the slides, extension cord if necessary. Make sure that you have things that you can engage with the enumerators during the training, like a flip chart, markers, sticky notes, pen and pencil, tape, notebooks, so that they can write. And then maybe you might need a microphone and speakers if it's a large room. I would encourage you to do a training where you don't, like in a space that you do not need a microphone so that it's more intimate, but in case people have trouble hearing, this would be important. And then before the training, just make sure you go through all of the materials that I will share with you with your emails that I now have. So thank you for that. And that you feel confident with it. And you can also email me directly. So this email address, this learning assessment email, I have access to, but I honestly, I have trouble controlling my own inbox, let alone a group inbox. So I would recommend you email me directly if there are any questions that come up. And CC the other Save the Children staff. Okay, providing feedback during the enumerator training. This is really important so that the enumerators are learning how to use the assessment. Don't be afraid to interrupt the enumerators if you see it being administered incorrectly. I would say do that during the practice days more than during the classroom days where they're practicing with each other more than with the child so that you're not interrupting the child. And also you can provide feedback after, during the practice days, you can go around while the data collectors are collecting and kind of oversee what they're doing. And if you hear something that they're saying that you're like, "Ooh, I don't think you should be saying that," speak with them afterwards and debrief with them. Okay, let's see. Oh, another important thing is to hire more enumerators than necessary, because you might find that enumerators during the training maybe they're now unable to commit to the time, or that they're having a lot of trouble and you don't think that they're going to be able to collect this data reliably. Then, they just because they've gone through the training doesn't mean that they maybe are able to do this data collection. Yeah, and that way you can also motivate them for high performance by saying that not all of the people trained may be actually doing the data collection. This isn't a requirement, but it is a way of, if you're working with people you have not worked with in the past, it's a way of making sure that, you're sort of vetting them as you go. And then the homework can be helpful, ongoing testing, sort of making sure that things are going well. And then you can have a final test to qualify the enumerators. I don't have one. So if you want to do that, please let me know and I can help you develop something, or you can develop something on your own. Prior to the training, at this point, you should have a back translated tool. You should have all reviewed the adaptation and administration guide. And the slide deck that I've shown, so that you've reviewed it on your own as well. During the training, you can make changes to the wording, but you should not make major changes to the tool. So definitely don't remove a section, for example. Yeah, so making changes to the wording is fine. Just make sure that you're all doing the same changes. Okay. Oh, and then let's say at N9, you should do a refresher training so that the enumerators remember all of the things prior to administration. If, let's say, you do the training and then a month goes by before data collection, you may need to do a refresher as well. Let's see, other pieces to highlight here. You will have this document, so you can go through this. I think most of this we've already discussed. And then let me show you the sample. So this is a sample schedule. You can go through and use this exact schedule, or you can revise it based off of your context. So this includes 5 days, 3 days in training and 2 days of practice. And you see here that we've identified like this would be the pair day, and then the second day would be individual. If you only have one day, then make sure you combine both pair practice and individual practice on one day. And then I will divide out the PowerPoint into these different sections so that you can easily review it with the enumerators. All right. Any questions so far in the training, numerator training guide? This is all basically written out in basically identifying the same things that are in the PowerPoint that we've already gone through. Yeah. Yeah, if it's appropriate, you can also videotape if you have, consent, so that you are you can watch the videos and discuss and observe. I've never done this because we've never gotten consent for videotaping or even asked for it, but it's something to consider if you would like. There's a reflection form in this where you can, discuss about, the peers can review each other during the practice days. You do not need to use this, but you can. And then there's a certificate at the end. Enumerators generally like to get a certificate at the end of training. So you all can do that. And we can actually, if you would like a certificate as a master trainer after this, then we can also provide you one. All right. So that's everything to go over today. Any questions?
Do we get certificate which you
I
already
can give you
told?
a certificate if you like. You're
Yeah,
master trainers at this point because we've gone through the tool together and you're going to train others. So I can give you,
Yeah.
all right, you want a master trainer certificate. I can definitely do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. That would be great.
Yeah. Okay, so for tomorrow, you do have homework, but this homework might not apply to all of you. We need to know the population that you are working with for the 8 to 14-year-olds in Skills to Succeed. From that population number, we can identify the sample, but what we need is the population by location, age, and gender. That's what we need for tomorrow. So tomorrow during the day, because I know it is the end of the day for you, and hopefully you all have gotten to eat some dinner, please send me, and I think this might be Islam, maybe it's Nafisa, I don't know, the population information by location, age, and gender. So it doesn't have to be the individual names. I just need the number of children by location, age, and gender. We will finalize any changes to the tool, anything based off of this conversation that I will make some edits today. And then we'll talk about the timeline for the enumerator training. So please come with some ideas of when you can do this training. We'll also talk a little bit about the analysis because I'm not sure who is leading on the analysis. If it's me, then it's fine. If it's not me, which is also fine, I will provide the analysis materials to you all so that you can conduct the analysis yourselves. All right, any questions on what we're doing tomorrow?
Just one note to jump in on the population size piece. So I think that will be from you, Mobashar, and if you need to check with the program team, but I think we will just need the population size for year 3 of GG7. So that's the upcoming year, the remaining year of the program. That will be our population size for ISELA. I know you have shared that with us for year 1 and year 2 in like an Excel table. So I think something similar to that, as Ali said, for year 3, the location, age, and gender. If you can have that for tomorrow. I recognize it might still be an estimate since I know you're finalizing your training plans, but that will be really helpful. So we have that for the meeting tomorrow.
Okay, just information for Ellie that we have selected the population, and when we start our training, because we design first cohort number, then we have selected this children. And this is not a whole population in a time selected, but if we provide you the population that third year is cohort number, the children we can provide you. But before that, how this can be identified, their age and location, this is okay, but age and gender, that we assume that 50-50 boy and girl, but age is difficult, but age range is quite okay, 8 to 14 years old.
It
Okay.
is difficult to mention.
Yeah, so age, then if we won't have that breakdown, we'll just try to do equal representation by age randomly. Gender being 50-50, that makes it easy. So it would just be by location then. And I just put in the chat, it would also be useful to know which partner is working in which location, or if you're not working, like if multiple partners are working in the same location, with which population or with which schools, so that we are able to then finalize we might end up working in teams tomorrow so that we're able to consider our own enumerator training plans by partner. Will the enumerator training be conducting across partners, or each partner will be conducting your own training?
Just depends. We can arrange the training combinedly or combinedly we can arrange.
I think combined would probably be easiest. And then we
Yes.
could have a representative from each organization there who's involved here. And that way everyone is receiving the same training too.
Okay, only population, you're asking population as a whole, or cohort wise we can provide you?
I don't know what the cohorts are, so you can just provide me what you have. And I can just, if you explain it to me in email, I can work on the sample pieces.
Okay.
Mobashibai,
Yes, Papa.
can I add something for Ellie? Ellie,
Sure.
for the population is we have first year and second year total population for every in every partners. There is a lot of numbers, and we are running right now 16 cohorts, means 16 batch with the ID number, name, sex, age, and everything is there. So for first year and second year, we will be able to give you the exact number, exact what location and everything is, and gender. But for the third year, with the assumption, we can give the only number, area, and male female ratio 50-50. So is it okay?
It is okay. Yeah, that is okay. If you can give me that information, and we'll talk more about this tomorrow in terms of the design of the baseline data collection. Yeah, because I have some questions in terms of who we're going to be sampling from, and we'll just talk all of that out.
Ellie, I have a question. You already mentioned population, location, and age. Is it for year 1 to year 3 all?
That is one of my questions for you. I don't know who we're sampling from. Melissa?
Just for year three.
Yes, Melissa mentioned already. Yes, only year 3.
Only year 3. No,
Yes.
I'm confusing after Nazma Apar speech.
Yes.
No.
Okay. Okay.
That
Only year 3.
We can
that
as
we,
a that in the third year.
Yeah.
Yeah, but third year
Maybe
we
mention third year.
But third year we do not have any cohort yet. We
Right.
have to plan for year 3 cohort.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's okay if we don't have the breakdown by cohort yet. Let's just look at the overall population, and then we can go from there.
Also,
Yeah.
we
Okay.
don't have any data
Okay.
for year 3. Right, Mubashir bhai?
Yeah, we don't have population data, segregated location, age, and gender for year 3 actually.
Yeah,
Right now.
right.
Okay, if we
Yeah,
have the overall
especially
size, we can do
especially
that.
all partner are working their respective area. There is no double counting or same location. Both partner are working. This is not a scenario. That's why every partner they are working their own area. So this area can we can identify it easily.
Okay, so we'll go with the larger number. I realize we are at time. We are definitely going to continue this conversation tomorrow. So looking forward to chatting with you all then. Thank you for your participation today. And do come if you have any questions on what we've gone over the past 2 days. Please do let me know. And I'll give you one more piece of homework. If you can review that COBO form and enter data, and actually submit it, just practice data, because that will give you more firsthand experience, especially for those of you who've had connection problems today. All right, thank you all.
Thank you, Hele. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you,
Thank you all.
Thank you.
you
Have a
so
good
much.
day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Have a
Bye.
good day.